Hello and welcome to FGC Philosophy. I'm your host, The Philosopher, and this is where we talk about a bunch of different topics that matter to me that are going to help us all level up inside and outside the virtual arena. I've been focusing a lot more on the fighting game stuff now that I've kind of gotten my second, third wind in fighting games, playing Fong. I hit Diamond recently, I talked about that before, but I just had a lot of thoughts really going in my head as I've been making these realizations and going back to the basics and trying more advanced stuff. So I want to start talking to higher level players that are better than me, players that have beaten me in tournament or have won way more tournaments than I have. I'm talking about Truth, aka Soul. I consider him a member of the FGC, the Kalamazoo FGC, but he's from Detroit, or at least he lives in Detroit now, and really great dude, really awesome, very thought-provoking, very logical player, very explosive Cammy player. So I had him on the show. He is someone that I've known for a good bit now. I ran into him for the first time in ComboCon 2018, I want to say 2018, 2019, 2018, I think. And that rivalry has been there ever since then, at least on my side. I beat him in like winners finals or something like that, and then he 6-0'd me in winners grand finals that long time ago, and ever since then I've never been able to beat him in tournament since, at least when he's playing his main and I'm playing my main. So he's won several tournaments. He's won several of the Mighty Modem Monday tournaments, first off, the ones that we host locally here every Monday night. But he's also won other tournaments, and he's one of the best players in the Michigan area, probably the best Cammy in Michigan, if not the second best. I can't think of who else there would be in Michigan. But yeah, Truth, very great person, commentates sometimes, competes in the tournaments. Had him on, started picking his brain. I feel like we got into a lot of different deep dives inside the topic of mainly the mental game, or mainly just how you approach Street Fighter V, how you approach playing fighting games in general, mainly specific to Street Fighter V, but you can apply many of these concepts in some manner to other games, other fighting games, maybe even other non-fighting games, right? Other competitive games. But yeah, so we talk a lot about maintaining a productive level of focus, what you're focusing on. I differentiate between vigilance and focus, and also concentration. There's different concepts around how the brain works and how you pay attention to certain things and how long you do that, and what you're being aware of, right? And so I wanted to really differentiate with some words. We dig deep. We talk about the fact that I have A.D.D, he has A.D.H.D, and how we combat that in our own ways. A little bit about how we think, because the big thing for me is it's important for other people to understand how other people think. One of the biggest benefits for me in my journey of personal development is learning how other people see things. Specifically towards self-confidence, for me was the one that really got me thinking. I was never really naturally confident or arrogant or anything like that. I didn't like to show off or anything. I was very, very timid for a long time. And seeing how other people think about confidence and everything encompassing that, it really got me to think about how I look at it, and maybe that perception can be changed and tweaked so that I can be confident as well. And the same thing applies to getting better at fighting games. I really want people to try to put themselves out there and improve and learn, and not be afraid of failure. So I hope this conversation is helpful for you guys. If it is, make sure you leave a comment down below. I'll also put links to the social media for Truth as well. Very great Cammy player. And of course, if you want to get sets with him or anybody else, you can also always join the Kalamazoo FGC. The Discord link is going to be in the description as well. So that said, thank you guys so much, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, so I think the first thing that I want to do is kind of share my experience real briefly. I talked about this with probably conversations with you in person, but then also in my last podcast, so this kind of segues real nicely into it. But I've been talking about how when I started learning hit confirming, I got better at being more aware of more information. So like the same thing happened when I learned meaties. Essentially, I learned a new skill, and now that I understand it a little bit better, I'm able to extract more information. So with meaties, I learned how to do a meaty, for each different wake up. And then after I did that, I started to realize that people have their own personal patterns on how they quick rise. I hadn't really thought about it beforehand, but now I could be like, okay, well, this person tends to do this, so with Fong it's a little bit different. I have to pick which slide I want to do beforehand, and then from there I have different meaty setups. versus like Kareen, she works a little bit differently with like what buttons I can do. But either way, I notice new patterns because I have a new set of skills. The same thing happened with hit confirms, where it's like, okay, this person likes to stand up a lot more, or they press, certain buttons. It's not perfect yet. There's still a lot of gaps in my knowledge, but because I'm able to hit confirm and I'm confident in, like, if a button hits, I can do certain things. It affects their behavior. It affects new ways of playing the game. And so I'm realizing more and more and more that, different parts of concentration are important, because now I have this skill. It forces me to pay more attention. Otherwise it kind of falls off. It's not like the muscle memory is there for confirming, but like the act of remembering to use my muscle memory isn't quite like automatic yet. So there's times where, especially when I'm tired, where I have to remind myself to focus on confirming, and then doing the confirming isn't hard as long as I'm reminding myself to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, actually.
Okay, cool. So I guess the first question would be for you, how challenging was it to be able to focus on, like, maintaining productive focus in Street Fighter?
That's actually a good question. At least in terms of how I normally do it, is just that the less things I really necessarily have to think about, and in terms of like intangibles, more so like worrying about the character, worrying about what I could do to punish, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The less I have to think about, the more that I can actually focus on pretty much beating my opponent and figuring out what my opponent can do. So I don't have to worry about what I'm doing instead of just worrying about what you're doing, pretty much, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, so you're comfortable enough with your own character so that you can put most of your concentration on what they're doing versus like what you need to do.
Exactly.
So like when I fight you, for example, a lot of times when I'm in these situations, I know as soon as I jump, I'm going to get anti-aired if I'm fighting your Cammy. Like, I know, I'm like, okay, well, he already knows to look for this, so you're already doing it. It's like, I know how to anti-air. Most people at, this rank and higher know how to anti-air, but there's something going on where their focus is directed somewhere else. Like, it could be on their own character, it could be on the opponent's ground game, but somehow, like, you're able to maintain this, at least when you're fighting me and players around my skill level, you're able to maintain awareness of a lot of these things. And even people on like your skill level and higher, you've been in these tournaments a lot and you fight a lot of these people. So like, how are you able to diversify? I'll use the word vigilance, right? So the word vigilance means the action or state of keeping careful watch of possible dangers or difficulties. I don't think that term is used enough because it's different from focusing. It's like you're specifically being aware of these things, but also not focusing on the stuff that's not relevant. So like, how do you maintain being able to anti-air consistently, but also being aware of like an opponent's ground game, for example?
I would probably say like the best way for me to really like focus on at least when it comes out to like anti-airing, like let's say for instance, like I put like chunks of like my own type of like memory and focus on certain things. Like for instance, like when it comes down to like how I focus on ground game, I don't really focus too much on more so like, trying to whiff punish, at least for real. I'm more like certain buttons. Yeah, I look for, like, for instance, if you're doing like, let's say for instance, you're playing like Fong and you're doing like either, I think it's down forward heavy punch, the one where he kind of like slaps up and down. Yeah. I'll look for that, or I'll look for certain buttons for other characters, stuff like that. Certain buttons, certain moves. So stuff that I know that I can easily whip punish. The other buttons I'll just try to stuff out with pokes. So I don't really have to necessarily worry about whether or not, oh, he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that. I gotta focus on the ground game. No, I'm just looking for a couple of things, and then as soon as when you jump, I'm usually ready. And normally whenever it comes down to like certain situations, especially involving with like the corner, when a lot of people tend to jump out, it's actually better to take the crosscut DP if your opponent is capable of doing it, because you're out of the corner. You only took like 120, maybe 130 damage, and you're out of the corner.
Mm.
But yeah, it's just that I always keep a little bit of awareness when it comes down to anti-airing, because whenever I don't, that's something that my opponent can take advantage of, and that's making me having to play defense more, which I really don't want to.
That makes sense. Okay, so how do you filter out the useless information then? Like, how are you getting rid of what's not useful to you?
I mean, in terms of like, I don't really think there's really any type of information that I feel that is kind of useless. But it's just more so what takes priority over others. So for instance, like if I'm going up against an opponent that's like that, I'm trying to figure out, like, first game, I don't know how this opponent plays at all. I have to pay attention to certain tendencies of what my opponent is doing. Is he walking back and forth a lot? Is he doing it aimlessly? Like, even when it comes out to like confirms, is he confirming it, or is he just doing it? Or is he dashing? Is he jumping a lot? Stuff like that. That's stuff that I really have to pay attention to, and I'd be able to take to my advantage. If a person is teching a lot, I could delay button, I can shimmy. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of things that open up when it comes down to somebody who does something a lot versus somebody who does it sometimes. Because a player who does something sometimes, especially on the defensive end, is more scary than a player that does nothing, or a player that does something all the time. So, because that makes you kind of have to mix up your offense a little bit more than normal, while they could really just sit there and just analyze on what you're going to do, which means you'll have to utilize more of your options in some cases instead of just going with the same game plan. So that can be an issue for a lot of players as well, depending on how good defensively your opponent is, as well as offensively.
Yeah, I can see that in myself. I think my strategy is, like, some of my strings at the very least are very repetitive, and probably certain other kinds of pressure I'm not really thinking about just yet. But I find that in some form or fashion, I'm predictable, and I know it, because like certain players can beat me pretty consistently, and I'm like, okay, they know, like, there's certain players who are just better, like they have a better strategy, they execute it better, and there are some people who just know me and are able to know that I'm going to, like, do these things. And it's like, I know all the things that I do for the most part, like I'm the one that had those ideas and created those strategies, but at the same time it's like, okay, I'm stuck in a pattern to where I'm not, execution wise, I'm still improving, I'm still learning new things about the game. But in terms of, like, especially Fong's playstyle, because I feel like he has an established playstyle where with Karine it keeps changing based off of the skills that I acquire with her. So I can see that in myself.
Yeah, because the way that I kind of view things is that it's kind of like I developed a flow chart, at least when it came down to Cammy, like. Because really, to be honest, I really don't do that much. Like, a lot of people would see that I'm doing, like, all of this crazy stuff when I'm not really doing a lot. I'm only doing really about 2 or 3 things, really, to be honest. And that's a part of the flow chart, is just having like 2 to maybe like 4 or 5 different strategies that you could just do and just mix up without you necessarily having to think about it. It's in a sense, it's like it's an autopilot, but it's not an autopilot at the same time. You don't have to necessarily have to think about switching it up. As long as it's like, if you've done it so many times and no one went to switch up, then it's not going to harm you. As long as you utilize it, as long as you're utilizing your flow chart effectively. And that's something that I learned from L Train.
I think there's an argument to be made that it could be even more productive, because if you have a set strategy and maybe either counter strategies or alternative strategies, then you can test those strategies out and acquire actual information versus playing quote unquote like just random. It's like, okay, I'm gonna try this play style against. It depends on the situation. Like in the first of two, maybe you might not get a lot of information if you're playing in just that set. But if you're playing with friends or you're doing a long set, I can see having the chance to test out multiple strategies and looking at, okay, this is how this player, like especially if it's a character issue and not necessarily a player issue, or maybe a certain strategy that you struggle with, and playing and trying your own preset ideas against them and being like, okay, I'll try these specific things. This works, this doesn't, and you can kind of create a new strategy of like kind of putting certain parts of it together depending on what it is that you're doing. Like maybe you play more aggressive, but you take away this tool for a long time, and that like makes them forget about it. Which usually you use it in more of your aggressive playstyle, but now it's like, okay, I'm going to use it more of my defensive playstyle and then bait them out into doing something. Like Karin's Orochi, for example, a lot of times I'll overuse it just to make people like want to start taking their turn. And then once they start taking their turn and I take a couple of hits for it, like I'll just go ahead and blow them up with DP when it's like in a really stressful situation and they forget that I have that option. So it's like, maybe I used to use it more aggressively, but then I change it up and I use it to close the gap, like just to close the gap against like projectile characters or something like that. And then I'll like just not use my EXDP at all, or I'll use it a bunch of times to make them think I'm going to do something, so they're scared and they're going to like just block and I'll just walk up grab or something like that. So you can take different parts, and I think that there's some information that's easier to acquire rather than just like grinding it out with a bunch of sets.
Right.
But either way would work, but I think that's more productive if you go in with a strategy, because you can test theories and you can get information and bring it back. Because I'm guilty of just playing the game randomly and not really having an idea. So I know that way for me isn't the best versus like, okay, here are these things I'm going to work on. Here are these skills I'm going to acquire. Let's see what I learn along the way. And that's like, it's more rewarding for me personally. Like to each of their own. Like there's no right way to play the game. But I think for certain kinds of people, at least for myself, the concepts that we're talking about are more productive.
Yeah.
Especially when you add in the fact that like, for me, I think I told you before, but I have A.D.D. Something I was diagnosed with for a long time. I never took medication for it. I probably never will. Well, no, I took medication. It didn't work. I stopped taking it like, when I was 17, 18 years old. Ever since then, like meditation and exercise are the ways that I try to maintain my focus. So a lot of these things, it's like I know to focus on them, but my mind can very easily wander. If I don't like listen to music or something like that, I have to concentrate on focusing on the game sometimes, or whatever it is that I'm doing. I don't think everyone has this issue. It's really easy to like look at the game, but sometimes my mind can just wander while I'm still looking, and like it's probably like 80% capacity, 50% capacity, or something like that. But like these are all things that I'm more like hyper aware of, because I know how easy it is for me as an adult to like maintain my focus versus like being in high school and like zoning out, daydreaming when the teacher's talking about nonsense. So, in your personal experience, like how hard is it for you to maintain focus on the game? Is it like really simple, that comes naturally, or is it something that you have to actively think about?
So, one thing for certain that a lot of people don't know, I actually have ADHD myself. And I used to take medication for it when I was younger. But then as I got older, I kind of found my own ways to be able to mitigate it. Like it still happens every so often. Like I'll get distracted by some stuff every so often, but the majority of the time I usually can maintain focus. But maintaining focus when it came down to like playing this game for certain, as I got more experience, I learned how to kind of like shut out like any outside noise in a sense. Because when I was first playing this game, I used to get distracted by all the outside noise. Like whenever I went to the locals, I would get distracted by everything. And I had to focus on that to the point where it was like, now if I could sit in a crowded room, everybody is talking, all this crazy stuff, and as soon as when it says round one fight, I hear nothing else.
You're locked in.
Locked in, completely locked in. I don't get distracted by anything else. And it's like you could be yelling in my ear, screaming. I won't hear any of it.
Yep. I will tell
And
you what, the Detroit scene helped me with that. Like, I have a preference of playing music if I have the option, but now, like, because of the Detroit scene, I've learned, all right, this is how you block stuff out. Before then, most people are respectful. Or, like, not that it's disrespectful, it's just, like, they're a different crowd. And, like, you know what to expect when you go to the Detroit scene, so it's like, you gotta learn how to block that stuff out and not let it get to you.
yeah, that, like, dealing with all that crowded noise, at least from the Detroit scene, definitely helped me out quite a bit. And it's just more so like, now that when it came down to me like playing on stream, at least when it was offline and online, I just play it like it's normal. I don't try to go on ahead and do any type of fancy stuff, no matter how much, you know, everybody would like to say that I do fancy stuff. But I think I could consider myself a rather boring player, but I mean, it works.
So this almost falls into a different topic, but it's still focus related, so I'll touch on it real quick. So we kind of talked about, you know, playing on stream and playing in crowds. I think those are all different kinds of distractions, but in terms of distractions in general, it's like, I'll explain how my brain works as an example. When like people are talking, whether they're talking about me or just really loud, I naturally just want to look. That's how my brain works. It's like almost like a self-defense mechanism where it's like something's moving, I see like moving lights, I gotta check it out. I've learned to push that away. The harder one that I also learned that I think is more important for a lot of people is like when people are talking about you, your playstyle, or like your character or anything like that, and not partaking in that activity, like not letting your brain go that way, right? Because there's a lot of people who are like, they'll either hear the commentator or they'll hear someone talking about them and they'll respond. And like, I'm not talking about Punk where it's like, okay, you know, there's people like Michael Jordan in Punk that they get empowered by that kind of stuff. But then there's other people who get tilted by this kind of stuff. And it's the way I see it is like when you're partaking in what someone else says or thinks about you, even if you're making up a story about like, you know, you have stream jitters, you're nervous about what people are saying about you or thinking about you. Like I see it as a distraction. Like I don't see that as useful information that's going to do me any good, like in any situation. So my logic is to just like not, you know, put my attention on the game and what I can do and nothing else. Like I have to actively remind myself to do that, but it's like it's really easy to not focus on that kind of stuff because it's like, how important is that to me? You know, if I'm a little bit upset because I was lost around and I hear people talking, take a couple deep breaths, put my attention back on like what I can do, see how I'm feeling, and then, you know, get back to my strategy and try to do it the best that I can. But a lot of other people, they can't do that. It seems like, you know, they get tilted or they get worse and worse and worse. You see people like get really mad. I know people personally that have like been mad on stream and were nervous just because of on stream, or even like reacting to me as a commentator, like talking to me directly and like losing that game and being salty at just everybody, you know. For you, you know, what is your personal approach to, you know, the loud noises or people talking about you? Like where is your mindset at, and then what advice would you say to deal with that?
With me personally, like I said, it's just I've learned how to shut out all the noise and everything. It's just that for a very long time, at least when I was on the rise up, at least when it came down to Street Fighter V, I was not relatively well liked in terms of the game. Like I wasn't hated, but it's just I wasn't liked because of the character that I played. And pretty much my first big test was when I was playing. This was, I think it was about 4 years ago, YumaCon 2017, when they had like the sets, like the grudge matches and all that. And I had to play Q in the first to 10.
Oh.
And it was set about 2 months before, so it gave me 2 months to train. So I trained relentlessly because I did not want to lose, and I was very unfavorite. And when it came down to that set, like a lot of people thought I was going to lose free, And when I came into the set that Friday, despite I think I was like 2-3 minutes late because of the elevator situation, but we're not gonna talk about that. But yeah, I was locked and loaded. Like, it was an entire crowd ready to see this, and Q pretty much, he wanted to play. He played his game the way that he wanted to play. He was playing his characters that he wanted to play and everything. And the thing was that the one thing that I was focused on, for instance, was just to pretty much just to have fun, like really just to have fun and to learn from what I can exactly do in order to beat him, and really, to be honest, how to put him on tilt so I can actually steamroll him. And that's exactly what I did after when, I think it was game 3. Game 3, he started being a little bit on tilt, so I started to steamroll him. And then when he went to the strategy that to be honest, I didn't want him to go to, which was to pick the character that I could not beat to save my life at that time, which was Birdie. Like, I couldn't beat Birdie to save my life.
Oh man.
And he brought out Birdie when I was up 9-1 in the set, and he beat me one time. I'm like, oh crap, this could get bad if I don't end this now. And I kind of got tilted for a second after when I lost that second game, and I sat there for like a good 5-10 seconds just thinking. I'm like, okay, even though this character is annoying, irritating, and all the synonymous words possible, I have to win this. So I literally took a deep breath, took a sip of my orange Powerade, and just played it out, and I ended up winning 10-2. So and pretty much the crowd was very against me, and I'm used to it. I'm used to being the villain when it came down to certain things, because I like the negative energy when it comes down to like playing a game, because it fuels the fire, because I like proving people wrong in a lot of situations. And the crowd was literally on his side, because they so many people thought that I wasn't good, all that, and it was just I had to beat him. So it was just overall like that was the big test for me personally to really like keep focused, because that was probably like one of the largest crowds I played in a while, probably since like Combo Breaker 2017, when I had to play on stream for top 32.
Damn.
So yeah.
Let's dissect that a little bit. Like, what did you do to untilt yourself? Like in that breathing, right? Like what logics did you have to kind of put back together, so to speak?
I just had to just not get upset about anything that was going to happen, like any type of intangibles, like any type of random moments, any type of scrambles. I had to get rid of that immediately, because if I let that stick in my head, I was going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to just let it rock. Once I started letting all the nonsense rock, that's when I was able to really just close it out.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for a lot of people who, like, it may not come naturally to, it's such an intangible like way to. It's hard to explain this logically for a lot of people, because it's something that you have to just redirect what your attention is on. Because a lot of people have this habit of thinking about a situation and then having an emotional reaction to that situation that they created in their head, and then behaving as if that like situation is like an inevitability, so to speak. So it's like, oh, I'm nervous, I'm going to get embarrassed because people think A, B, and C about me, and I'm going to look stupid. And then like all they do is create behaviors that reinforce that. They don't play as hard, they don't make as good decisions. They're too focused on everything but the game. And so it's like it's literally a distraction, and it's not useful information. And so it's hard to like emphasize this enough, because a lot of people, they get stuck on this alone, where it's like they think something really toxic, a character's OP, and they're just like hyper focusing on this useless information rather than getting like information from the game and learning. They're just like sitting there trying to find ways to like justify their loss, or they just get caught in some emotional, like it's like a negative feedback loop where they get mad and they get sad and they get mad and they get sad, but they don't really get themselves out of it because they're too focused on the wrong information. So for the listeners out there that need this, like, this is for you guys. Make sure you learn how to redirect your attention so that you don't actually engage, because you're creating a story that isn't true, for those that do it. And then from there, it's like you're reacting as if it's real and it's not. So don't do that. Cut that out if you can. But yeah, so I wanted to touch on that a little bit. Like, that's a whole other topic of like confidence that I could get into, and I hope to do in the future. I've done it in the past, but like in terms of focus, it's something that isn't like, you shouldn't be vigilant for that information. It's not useful. You want to be vigilant for like the player's tendencies, or like the proper information, like paying attention to jump ins, whiff buttons, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think the interesting thing with focus I touched on earlier is the fact that not just your level of focus, but the level of things you're able to notice tends to improve as your skill level improves with the game. So if you acquire a certain skill, usually more information around that is going to become more readily available. Like I talked about the way people wake up on buttons and stuff like that. So in your experience, when you have improved as a player, in what ways has your focus improved, that it was like things you noticeably improved on, like, and were now able to be more aware of that you weren't before?
I view improvement as things slowing down for me. So Street Fighter V is a very, very fast-paced game. It can be over in a matter of seconds. But as you constantly improve in the game, and a lot more things become second nature, and you stop thinking about certain things, the game slows down for you. You're able to focus on a lot of things that you didn't wouldn't be able to see. Like for instance, when I realized the last time when I made that big jump, which was probably more so a few months ago, when I started making a big jump and started improving again, it was just that I noticed that I was reacting to dash ups a lot more. I was making players pretty much, I was dictating the pace. Like, I was able to slow the pace down to a snail run. I was able to pretty much like to create it into like a track meet. I was able to go on ahead and be able to do all these things that I wasn't able to do because beforehand, before I had became stagnant, and when it came down to my improvement, I plateaued, and I had started to realize that I was playing the game the way that the game was meant to be played instead of breaking the rules like I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really like the door that needs to be open when it comes down to becoming a high level and a top level player. Because top level players, they don't play the game the way that it should be played. They play the game the way that they want to play it. They break the rules, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a really good book. I wish I could remember the quote, but the book is Mastery by Robert Greene, and in it he covers a lot of the quote unquote geniuses like Beethoven, or Wolfgang von Goethe, Einstein, like a bunch of like Edison, a bunch of famous like really successful people, athletes, and just all kinds of people. And in it, he talked about something very, very similar, where it's like Da Vinci, for example, like he understood how traditional art was done very, very well, but he also took the time to like create his own style, so to speak, within and outside of the realm of like the rules of art at that time. And so it's like you have these people who are masters who can do like obey the rules, but because they know the rules so well, they can like kind of bend them to their will, so to speak. Martial artists are also really good at that, and it keeps evolving, like MMA being like the ultimate form of martial arts nowadays. But it's very, very true, where it's like, yes, you do have to understand the rules, and that's going to help you a lot, but you also have, like, you can't be bound within those rules. I think at various different levels, I see a lot of players that succumb to that at some point in time, I think the most obvious way to notice this is when people say, "Why would you do something like that?" That's a very like simplistic way of noticing it, but a lot of players adhere to the rules so strictly that they have a hard time beating players who like play from the heart, for example, or something like that. And that's still like what they're thinking about, but it's also what they're not thinking about, or what they're not thinking is a possibility. They're kind of limited in terms of what they think is most likely to happen, right? Does that make sense?
Right.
So I don't know if that falls into the realm of like focus per se, but it's just like there's all these things that are all mental that can hugely impact the game that have nothing to do, well, have very little to do. Like you have to have mechanical skills, or you have to have good execution to do a lot of these things. But at a certain point, a lot of the pros have said this that I've talked to, they all say at a certain point, like execution isn't really a factor anymore, because that's something you put time into and you don't really have to think too much about it. I didn't understand that, maybe a year or two ago, but now I get it a lot more. My execution is not immaculate, but it's good enough to do like, just frame Orochis or just frame Tenkos into Orochis somewhat consistently. So I feel like I've learned, I've improved at that skill. And now it's like, okay, like doing hit confirms would have been impossible if I couldn't do the rest of that combo. But it's like eased up so much space where it's like, okay, my attention now is on confirming. Eventually it won't be on confirming. I can just do it more naturally. But for now, that's kind of where I'm at. And not really think too much about the combo. I might drop it from time to time, but it's like, okay, I know why I dropped it. I need to just tighten up, like do it a little bit later. Usually I do it too early, yada yada yada. In what ways have you broken the rules?
The ways that I've broken the rules, I started being able to implement more fake setups into my game plan instead of just using all real setups, all true setups. I have like implementing real and fake stuff and being able to mesh it together and make it seamless makes it scary, which means it forces your opponent to react to something. And
to at least consider.
Yeah, it forces them to react. So when you start mixing in real and fake stuff and making it seamless, that's when your offense becomes way scarier. It's kind of the same thing on defense. And like, for instance, if you're going up against somebody who likes to jab a lot versus somebody who, is really good at just, checking a lot of things, stuff like that, like they're noticing a lot of things. Like they're noticing when stuff is real, they're noticing when stuff is fake. And you have to keep that in mind, because a lot of top players mix in real and fake stuff quite a bit. Like some people will do like double dash ups on certain wake ups. Some people will do like a meaty that's not like a true meaty, but you'll still get hit because you don't notice it. Anything like that. Like when you start, like I started breaking the rules, being able to do that because I can tell when I started to implement a lot of the fake stuff, my win rate was started to skyrocket. I was winning a lot more. I was making my opponents fear me more on offense versus me being, that's like the unpredictability pretty much becomes a factor there. That's when unpredictability really becomes a factor, is when you're able to just have establish that you have real setups, and then you just start mixing in fake stuff. It works.
Why do you think that is?
Because so many people expect people expect the real stuff. People don't expect the unexpected. And that's something that a lot of players need to be able to do. They need to expect the unexpected. And like once you go up against a player and you develop a decent amount of respect, and then when they get that hint, it's like, okay, he's starting to respect me a little bit too much. Now I can go on ahead and just do whatever I want to do. And once you're not ready for it, then I could just start mixing it in, and then you're gonna wonder what happened, and then you're just gonna have to look at the tapes and see what you could have done. Yeah. So that's what I ended up doing, because like prime example, the number one person who probably had to deal with the most of that was was 40% flash kick. Was when me and him played, and he was noticing that I was mixing in all the real and fake stuff because I figured out how to break the rules, and that's how I've been able to really like match him consistently in terms of it. And then I kind of became like a little bit of a tournament demon to him because he hasn't figured out, at least in my personal opinion. He probably might have already have, but it's just that when, like, in my prior experience of playing against him, like, I was able to dictate everything when it come down to my offense as well as his. Like, I wasn't fearful of anything while he was too busy being aware of what I was doing, because I was playing fast and slow at the same time, so it was kind of like catching them off guard. So that's like a prime example, is like those sets and like the tournament sets against him.
And so, like, clearly both you guys had really good mechanical skills or execution. What was it, you know, as best as you can say, what was it that allowed you to like beat him out? Was it certain buttons that you press at certain ranges? Like, you know, can you articulate that?
I would probably say it was more so like paying attention to the range that he wanted to play. He was playing at a specific range when I first started playing against him, and I didn't know exactly what to do. So when he was beating me consistently at one point, I was like, okay, let me go back to the tapes, let me see what I could have done. And I was just replaying certain stuff over and over and over again, where I was getting caught up, stuff like that, realizing what he wasn't taking advantage of. And then that's when I started implementing like certain things. Like I was implementing walking back against him more, blocking high, not really blocking his low that much, and pretty much like just playing a little bit more disrespectful against him, because playing him straight up is granted it's going to be a battle, but being able to play him at a slightly disrespectful level makes it a lot easier. It made it a lot easier for me. And then being able to shut down his options, because I had to lab Kage a lot when I played against him. So that's one thing he had to realize, that I was labbing a lot. Like I lab my wins, I lab my losses, all of that to maintain like my pretty much my consistency in terms of like your character, which also kind of implements into the whole focus thing. Like it implements it, because being able to lab and not having to really think about certain options, that's one less thing I have to worry about. That's for certain.
So are you saying it just like it happens automatically, where if something like if you see something happening, you just automatically react to it?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. And it's like at a certain range. So if someone's is this on average, or is this a player by player thing? Like, do you on average just look at the range and you try to figure out like what are they trying to do, or is it just like, okay, they're playing this character, most likely they're going to use these tools? Like, how do you assess that?
Generally, I go by character, but I also take enough notes in mentally based on the player. If you're playing a character and you want to use like your max range poke a lot, I'll more than likely stay at that range, or I'll probably go in and out of that range to force you to whiff. Or if you're playing a certain style, I have to adapt to your style, and then I'll be able to go on ahead and figure out a game plan pretty much off the top to figure out how to beat you. Because if I had to say a prime example of somebody I had to really adapt to, this was recently. I played against Demon Crest, the Warlord Fong player.
Oh,
very recently. I 2-0'd him in our set that we played. And when I last played against him, he was beating me because he was doing pseudo frame traps, where frame traps that are pretty much dictated by space. So if I press a button, I just get counter hit.
Yeah. Fong's good at that.
And he was very good at that. So he started doing it against me, and I had already came up with a counter strategy for it, which was really just to walk back. It was just a walk back, or pretty much just to sit there and see if he's going to whiff a button. And then when I noticed that he was doing it pretty much autopilot, I took advantage, and I realized that he was pretty much trying his hardest to get out of any type of pressure situation, whether it was backdashing, whether it was jumping back, neutral jumping, jumping forward out of corners. He was doing anything and everything to get away from my pressure.
Sounds about right.
And he wasn't respecting the fact that I had, once I had bar, he couldn't do anything.
No,
because I played at a specific spacing.
Can't do light kick Rio Benda. You can't slide for free or cancel.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was bad. Where I don't even think he took a round off of me. I think I just beat him 4 straight rounds. But
PTSD right now.
Yeah, it was pretty much with that and that concept. It was just me focusing on how to beat him, or figure out pretty much my easy way to beat him, versus like focusing on, oh, he's a warlord, I'm gonna get beat. No, that's not the case. I know how to beat him. I can figure it out. I think that one of the big things for certain, at least for a lot of players, a lot of people tend to lose focus when it comes down to viewing somebody's rank.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that with rank, all it is just how much time you really put in. And it's not an accurate representation of how people are, at least in terms of skill level, at least until you get to like Ultimate Grandmaster, even some Grandmasters and Warlords.
Yeah.
But even so, they don't know everything. But
yeah, I think higher ranks just show how much time has been put into the game for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a respectable thing, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily better or worse than you.
No. Yeah. But a lot of people see that rank and they lose focus. They just everything that they know about the game is just thrown out the window. They don't know what to do.
Yeah, I get excited. I think that's still a form of tilting, but I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play somebody really good that's gonna wash me. Like, let me see if I can beat this guy, and then if I don't, let me see how well I do against them. Like that's about it for me.
That's actually really good. Like, having that kind of mindset actually helps. Like it really does help, especially if you haven't got the chance to play against like the stronger players often. Once you get those opportunities, you really get to test your resolve on how you really get to play against them, and that really, to be honest, that's going to really help in terms of like how to really focus against like higher ranked players, because the way that they play the game and the way that like most players play, they don't think the same. They're playing a whole different game than you.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it. Like, you know, when I do these weekly tournaments and, you know, some of the DR people or like Blarlad come through, or even when I fight you guys, I'm like there's a clear difference in my logic. And like, obviously there's another echelon above that where you get like to the pro tier, but you know, I have access potentially to a lot of those players because not a lot of the pros are ranked, you know, warlord, or at least aren't playing on their main account with a ranked warlord. So like, I can get to play a lot of these a mixture of high ranking or experienced players, right? Like, even if they got into the master rank and they play like stupid random, they got to master rank somehow, so they won at least enough matches to get to that rank. So it's like, they may not have a play style that's respectable by the common public, but it's one that I should be aware of, because a pro might take some part of that, you know, and have some of that, but just do it better or more refined. So it's like, for me, I get to just play a larger pool of experienced players, and like, if I can beat them or if I can play them more, it'll be better. Because like, playing I play Blarla like once a week at most if I run into him on tournament, and that's about it. And that's the same thing with all the DR players. Like, I don't hit them up for enough matches though. I need to start doing that. But you know, the best 2 out of 3 isn't enough for me to usually learn, except for like in a VOD. But in like a best of 5 series is perfect, or a best of 10. those give me enough time to like maybe assess a few things and try some new things out. So it's exciting that I'm gonna run into more players, and like that's the only like once I learned that when Goku got to Diamond and is now playing Masters and Grandmasters and Ultimate Grandmasters, I'm like, oh, that's reason enough for me to get the Diamond. That was my motivation to get the Diamond, so that now I can play Master level players. Like that's all I want. I haven't played rank yet because I'm just kind of giving myself a break, so I don't de-rank myself and get all like in my head about it and just playing best of fives. But that's something to look forward to. Before I forget though, the last thing I want to hit on real fast, something that's helped me improve my focus, and it's kind of stupid, like it's kind of very common sense, but again, because of how my brain works, it's not so obvious, and that's the eyes and what your eyes do. I've learned as I've gotten better that it's really, really important to a couple of things. One, pay attention to the animations of the character. Like, there's so much information that you can get that can be missed if you're not very vigilant about it. The bar, best example I can think of is I lose to Zangief's in the past strictly because I forgot about V-Trigger 1. And you know my patterns from zoning, and I'll do those same patterns, and a Zangief will just V-Trigger me, and then after that is just two choices. I have to guess right 2 times. No, I have two chances, 2 wrong guesses, and I lose. That's basically it. That's how it transpires. Is he basically punishes me for doing projectiles mid-screen, pulls me in, has a meaty setup. I have to guess right. If I don't, then I have one more choice, and it's just like a struggle until I have to run him out. But the funny thing is that all I have to do is literally bait out V-Trigger 1, V-Reversal punish. I can literally punish his V-Trigger 1 with my V-Reversal, and there's nothing he can do about it. But I, in the past, have forgotten so many times, and it's only because of my eyes. Like, literally because I did not look there. Now, there's tons of examples all over Street Fighter, but I kind of wanted to touch high level, at least, for you, when it comes to utilizing the eyes, something that maybe might seem obvious to other people but didn't seem obvious to you that you had to look at. Is there any examples that you have there?
I'm usually pretty consistent when it comes down to paying attention to most situations. But there are every so often I'll screw up in terms of like me forgetting that I don't have V-Trigger, or I didn't build enough bar to get super, anything like that. Like for instance, like with the Geef situation. Like whenever I play against Geef, I don't really have to focus too much on his V-Trigger. I have to focus on super. That's what I really have to focus on when it comes down to him. Because if he has super, I have to respect him a little bit more. Because he could just do super in between my strings and I take 400. So I have to play it a little bit more. I have to play it a little bit more methodical, instead of just playing a little bit, instead of just just being a little bit more flowchart. Because a lot of Geef players, when they go up against Cammy, they tend to play a little bit more random, especially going up against a more oppressive Cammy. Because they know that once they get put into a knockdown situation, they have to guess. They have to guess bad when it comes down to it, because granted, Geef does have 1050. So he has a lot of chances against Cammy, probably about 5 to 6.
Yeah, he's willing to take those trades.
Yeah, he's willing to take the trades. Because if he gets one right read, then pretty much Cammy players have to guess between 2 to 3 times and she's dead.
Yeah, you have the same issue I do.
Yeah. So it's really just being able to be able to contain them. But certain, because I have to deal with certain, like being a Cammy main, I have to be aware of certain V triggers for certain. I definitely have to be aware of Zeku V trigger too. Like that eliminates me from jumping, period.
Yep.
I can't jump at all if he has that V trigger. That's why normally whenever I go up against Bushin Master, I don't jump once he gets V trigger.
I haven't learned my lesson yet.
Yeah, because he's one of them. Cody is another character. Like V-Skill 1, I can't jump. So a lot of characters where I have to feel like I have to play them on the ground, it eliminates one of my best options, which is the dive kick. But also it I can also play it to my advantage because mixing up the options can cause it to be baited. So that also helps. So it's all so I can play their option into my favor depending on the player. But with Bushin Master, not so much. I had to play him on the ground. I've tried jumping against him like 4 different times and I get smacked every time.
Yeah, he's good about that.
Yeah.
Very consistent. Okay, I feel like there's tons more that we can talk about this term, or this concept of focus or concentration, vigilance, like all the mental game. We'll have to revisit it in the future. I'm gonna still be continuing to like think about a lot of this stuff, so it's kind of where my headspace is at right now. Is just understanding the various facets of getting better at fighting games, including putting in the time. But that
Right.
said, anything you want to plug before you head out, like if you stream or anything like that?
Yeah, for certain. In terms of stream, my Twitch handle is Truth Plays with 1_ at the end, and when it comes down to Twitter, it's at Truth Speaks with 2 underscores. I don't really be on other social media like that, so just Twitter and Twitch.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much. And of course, you guys let me know your thoughts on this. What areas of focus do you guys struggle with? And what's something that you're actually really good at? And then, of course, make sure you subscribe so you can stay updated on these podcasts. Thank you guys so much for the support so far. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one.